The Cat Lady Named Arthur. Part 5. Arthur to Jenffer. By Jenffer J. Chapter 5. You ever notice how cats always land on their feet? Jenffer muttered, watching a stray tabby twist midair to avoid a puddle. She tucked her sketchbook tighter under her arm as the bell rang, its shrill echo scattering students like startled pigeons. The art room smelled of turpentine and the sharp tang of hot glue guns, a scent Jenffer associated with possibility. Miss J perched on a stool near the kiln, her posture oddly feline as she examined a student's lopsided vase. When she spotted Jenffer hesitating in the doorway, her gold-flecked eyes crinkled at the corners. "You're late," she said, though the words carried no bite, just the teasing lilt of someone who'd been waiting. Jenfer's fingers twitched toward her sketchbook, still hidden under her arm. She could feel Big Tom's laughter from yesterday vibrating in her ribs. Who wastes time coloring when they could be doing something? But Miss J was already clearing space at a paint-splattered table. "Show me," she said simply, as if she already knew about the charcoal drawings of alley cats that filled Jenfer's pages, the way their inky outlines seemed to twitch with life. Summary (1). Jenffer arrives late to art class, hesitating due to Big Tom's mockery about her passion. Miss J, with cat-like mannerisms, immediately senses Jenfer's unease and invites her to share her sketchbook of dynamic cat drawings, creating a safe space for creativity despite outside judgment. A crash echoed from the hallway, football gear hitting lockers, the unmistakable bark of Tom's voice, and Jenfer's shoulders tensed. Miss J's tail flicked in irritation. "Ignore the noise," she murmured, sliding a fresh sheet of paper across the table. Her fingernails, Jenffer noticed, were filed to neat little points. Creativity thrives in chaos. "Haven't you seen how cats nap through thunderstorms?" Jenffer exhaled, flipping open her sketchbook to a half-finished drawing of a tomcat mid-pounce. The charcoal smudged under her fingertips, leaving streaks like shadows. "It's just loud," she admitted, tracing the curve of the cat's spine. Miss J leaned in, close enough that Jenffer caught the scent of her bergamot perfume layered with something wilder, like crushed mint leaves. Down the hall, Big Tom's voice rose above the din, "That club's gonna turn you all into freaks." Followed by raucous laughter. A wet glob of chewed paper hit the art room door with a splat. Jenfer's ears burned, but Miss J merely twitched her nose, unimpressed. "Watch this," she whispered, plucking a paperclip from her messy bun. With a flick of her wrist, she sent it sailing out the door. A yelp cut through the laughter, Tom's voice again, but higher, startled, as the paperclip found its mark. Summary (1). When Big Tom's harassment escalates outside the art room, Miss J remains unfazed, comparing creative resilience to cats weathering storms. As Jenffer struggles with self-doubt while working on her cat sketches, Miss J demonstrates her own feline reflexes by precisely flicking a paperclip at Tom, disrupting his bullying with unexpected humor. Jenffer gaped. Miss J grinned, showing just a hint of canine reflexes, she said, tapping her temple. "Comes with the territory." The hallway fell abruptly silent, save for the scuffling of retreating sneakers. Jenffer exhaled, tension bleeding from her shoulders. She pressed her charcoal to the fresh page, and the lines came faster now, bold strokes shaping the arch of a cat's back, the alert tilt of its ears. Miss J hummed approval, her own fingers dancing across a scrap of canvas where she'd begun daubing ochre streaks that looked suspiciously like fur. The quiet didn't last. By third period, whispers slithered through the cafeteria, Tom nursing a red mark on his neck, his cronies casting glances toward the art room. Jenfer's tuna sandwich turned to sawdust in her mouth. She almost missed the folded note that landed in her lap until the corner prickled her thigh. Unfolding it revealed jagged block letters, *freak show cancelled. Meet me after school, *. The paper reeked of Axe body spray and spite. Summary (1). After Miss J's playful retaliation silences Tom temporarily, Jenffer finds renewed confidence in her artwork. However, the brief peace shatters when rumors spread through the school, culminating in Jenffer receiving an anonymous threatening note demanding she meet an unknown antagonist after school, signaling escalating conflict. Miss J intercepted her at the lockers, her nostrils flaring as she plucked the note from Jenfer's shaking fingers. Ah, she said, rolling the paper into a tight cylinder between her palms. The territorial marking begins. Up close, Jenffer noticed the fine white scar bisecting Miss J's eyebrow, a old claw mark, perhaps. The teacher tucked the note into her cardigan pocket, where it disappeared like a magician's handkerchief. Tell me, kitten, when a stray hisses at you, do you bare your belly or show your claws? The art room buzzed with tension that afternoon, the kiln humming louder than usual. Jenfer's charcoal snapped mid-stroke as Big Tom's shadow darkened the doorway. He loomed there, shoulder pads making him twice as wide, his jersey sleeves rolled to show off veined forearms. You ignoring me, freak show, he growled, but his eyes darted past her, searching for Miss J, who'd vanished behind the supply closet door with a suspiciously cat-like silence. Jenfer's fingers curled around the broken charcoal. It left jagged black crescents in her palm. She remembered the stray tomcat from her sketches, how it never ran, just went very still before pouncing. I don't take orders from house cats, she said, surprised by the rasp in her voice. The football team snickered behind Tom, but their laughter hitched when Miss J's voice purred from the shadows, especially not ones who flinch at paper clips. Tom's neck flushed mottled red where the makeshift projectile had struck earlier. He kicked a stool aside, sending it clattering against the kiln. This club's dead after today, he spat, but Jenffer noticed how his hands kept flexing, like he was preparing to catch something. The supply closet door creaked open just enough to reveal Miss J's gleaming eyes in the dark. Funny, she murmured. I heard dead things don't purr. Jenfer's pulse thrummed in her throat as she pressed her smudged palm against fresh paper. The movement left a perfect paw print in charcoal. Around them, half-finished sculptures seemed to lean closer, a ceramic wolf baring teeth, a wire-frame bird mid-flight. Tom's sneer faltered when the kiln let out a long hiss of steam, its metal sides expanding with a sound like growling. Miss J stepped into the light, her cardigan sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms dusted with clay. She held a lump of wet pottery between her hands, kneading it absently as she circled Tom. You know, she mused, in ancient Egypt, they worshipped cats as gods. Her thumbs pressed into the clay, forming sleek ears. Football players? Not so much. The football team shuffled awkwardly, cleats squeaking on linoleum. Jenffer exhaled through her nose, catching the scent of Tom's nervous sweat beneath his cologne. His Adam's apple bobbed as Miss J's shadow stretched long across the drying racks, tall enough, for a moment, to look like a sphinx. The kiln groaned again, and Jenffer swore she saw the hairs on Tom's neck rise. Here's the thing about art, Miss J said, spinning the clay between her palms until it took the rough shape of a crouching panther. It remembers. She nodded toward Jenfer's charcoal paw print. Long after your touchdowns fade from everyone's memory, that? She flicked clay at Tom's jersey, leaving a fleck of gray on his number. That stays. The silence that followed was the heavy kind, the pause before a storm breaks. Jenffer watched Tom's fingers twitch toward the clay stain, then curl into fists. His teammates shifted behind him, shoulder pads rustling like leaves in wind. Then, impossibly, the kiln door clanged open on its own, releasing a wave of heat that carried the scent of baking earth. Tom flinched. Miss J didn't move, but her pupils narrowed to vertical slits. Careful, she purred. Ceramic shards hurt worse than cleats. Jenfer's sketchbook fell open to her latest drawing, a tomcat mid-leap, claws extended. She hadn't realized until now how much its snarling face resembled Tom's. The kiln's heat made the air ripple like water. Tom wiped his forehead, smearing clay across his eyebrow. This is bullshit, he muttered, but his voice cracked on the last syllable. One of his teammates coughed, a wet, nervous sound, and suddenly the football players looked less like a pack and more like lost puppies. Jenfer's fingers itched. She grabbed a fresh stick of charcoal and began sketching rapid strokes on the paw print paper, not a cat this time, but a football helmet with cracked spiderwebbing across its surface. Miss J watched, her clay-stained fingers twitching as if she wanted to sculpt the tension right out of the room. Tom's cleat squeaked when he stepped forward. You think scribbling proves something? He sneered, but Jenffer noticed his gaze lingering on the cracks in her drawing. The kiln hissed again, and this time the sound carried words, or maybe Jenffer imagined it, a low whisper of fragile, fragile, fragile. Miss J flicked clay from her fingers. It hit the floor between them with a wet splat, shaping itself into a tiny lion. Funny, she said. I was just thinking the same about shoulder pads. One of Tom's teammates snorted, then clapped a hand over his mouth. The sound seemed to unravel something in Tom's posture. His shoulders slumped just enough to reveal the sweat-darkened straps digging into his collarbone. Jenfer's charcoal hovered over the cracked helmet. A drop of sweat from Tom's brow hit the paper, spreading the charcoal into a jagged river. She didn't flinch. You ever watch cats fight? She asked, adding delicate whisker-thin fractures to the drawing. They don't need armor. Just balance. Tom's breath hitched when the kiln door groaned again, casting a rectangle of orange light that striped his jersey like a warning. Miss J rolled the clay lion between her palms until it became something else, a football with tiny claw marks scoring its surface. She placed it deliberately at Tom's cleated feet. Touchdown, she murmured. The football team collectively inhaled as the clay ball split open down the seams, revealing a hollow center packed with shredded paper, art club flyers Tom had torn down last week. Jenfer's charcoal hovered over the sweat-blurred helmet sketch. The kiln's heat made the paper curl at the edges, warping the cracks into three-dimensional ridges. She pressed harder, darkening the fractures until they looked less like damage and more like deliberate lightning bolts. You're right, she said, watching Tom's reflection distort in the kiln's polished surface. Scribbles don't prove anything. With a sudden movement, she flipped the page to reveal yesterday's sketch, Big Tom mid-tackle, his body a perfect arc of muscle and motion, the football a comet streaking from his fingertips. Tom's breath stuttered. The drawing captured something cameras never did, the moment before impact when his eyes widened with something like wonder. Miss J plucked the sketchbook from Jenfer's hands and held it up to the light. Funny, she murmured, tracing the charcoal grass stains on Tom's knees. Looks like someone already turned you into art. The football team crowded closer, jostling to see. One of them, the sophomore with the bad knee, whistled low. Damn, Tom. You look kinda majestic. Tom's throat worked silently. The kiln's glow painted his cheekbones orange, smoothing the usual sneer from his face. He reached for the sketchbook, then jerked his hand back when his fingers left a sweaty smear on the margin. Jenffer didn't move. She could smell the Sharpie on his wrist where he'd inked champ above his pulse point, the letter slightly blurred from friction. Miss J tapped the sketch with a clay-caked fingernail. Notice how she caught your center of gravity? She traced an invisible line from Tom's arched spine to his planted cleats. Real power isn't in the hit, it's in the hang time. The football team murmured agreement, their earlier bravado dissolving like sugar in hot water. Tom's fingers twitched toward the sketch again, this time more carefully. He stared at the drawing like it was a playbook in a foreign language. Jenffer watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed what might have been pride. The kiln's metallic groan filled the silence, its heat making the air above the sketch shimmer like asphalt in summer. One of Tom's teammates, the one with the chipped front tooth, elbowed forward. Coach always says art's for pansies, he muttered, but his eyes kept darting to Jenfer's charcoal smudges shaping the grass blades beneath Tom's cleats. Miss J's laughter was a quiet rasp, like a cat's tongue on sandpaper. Funny, she said, rolling a ball of clay between her palms. Last I checked, Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel lying on his back for 4 years. You ever tried that after 2-a-days? The kiln ticked as it cooled, each metallic click syncing with Tom's slow blink. Jenffer watched his calloused fingers hover over the sketch, those same fingers that could spiral a football 40 yards now trembling like a kitten's whiskers. The sophomore with the bad knee reached past him to point at the drawing's edge. That's me. In the background. His voice cracked with something brighter than triumph. I look fast. Themselves depicted with grace, culminating in collective admiration that erodes the art sports divide completely. Game day dawned humid, the kind of weather that made the football team's pads reek of sweat and desperation by second period. Jenffer lingered by the field after lunch. her sketchbook clutched to her chest like armor. The cheerleaders' pom-poms rustled like startled birds when Big Tom stomped past them in full gear, then stopped dead at the sight of her. His cleats dug trenches in the dirt as he pivoted. "Freak show here to sketch our humiliation," he growled, but his hands kept flexing around his mouthguard like it was a sculpting tool. Miss J materialized beside the water cooler, her shadow stretching long across the 50-yard line. "Actually," she purred, plucking a sheet from Jenfer's sketchbook, "she's here to deliver your new playbook." The paper fluttered in her grip, a detailed charcoal sketch of the entire team mid-play, each player's stance annotated with arrows showing optimal movement. Tom's mouthguard hit the grass when he saw his own form captured mid-throw, his body a perfect coil of potential energy. The sophomore with the bad knee snatched the sketch, his eyes widening at the careful shading that made his braced leg look powerful rather than broken. "Coach never," he started, then swallowed hard. "He never diagrams like this." The kiln's heat seemed to follow them onto the field, making the air ripple above the bleachers. Jenfer's fingers itched as she watched Tom pick up his mouthguard, scrub it against his jersey, then hesitate. His reflection warped in her polished charcoal tin when he muttered, "You really watched all our practices?" Behind him, Miss J smirked, rolling a spare mouthguard between her fingers like a sculptor testing clay. "Every Tuesday and Thursday," Jenfer said, adding quietly, "your play-action fake is beautiful." The football team collectively inhaled. Tom's ears turned the exact shade of the kiln's warning light. By halftime, the sketch had been passed through so many sweaty hands the edges curled like old playbook pages. Jenfer sat cross-legged on the bleachers, redrawing the smudged X's and O's with a grease pencil while Miss J pointed out where the opposing linebacker kept shifting his weight. "See how his right cleat drags," she whispered, her breath warm with bergamot. The sophomore with the bad knee leaned over Jenfer's shoulder, his brace creaking. "That's my route," he blurted, then clapped a hand over his mouth when Coach whirled around. Tom snatched the sketch, his knuckles whitening around the paper. For the first time all season, his usual pregame scowl faltered into something almost like calculation. Environmental elements, kiln heat echoing bleacher warmth, blur studio field boundaries, as the sophomore accidentally reveals Jenfer's unrecognized tactical influence infiltrating the team's mindset completely. The third quarter started with a fumble, the opposing team's, not theirs, and Jenfer swore she saw Tom glance toward the bleachers before calling an audible. The play unfolded exactly as she'd drawn it, the chip-tooth receiver cutting left at the 45-degree angle, the sophomore faking a limp before bolting down the sideline. When Tom spiraled the ball, his throwing motion mirrored the charcoal arc in Jenfer's sketch so precisely the cheerleaders gasped. The kiln's ghostly heat seemed to follow the football's trajectory, making the pigskin glow orange for one impossible second before it smacked into the sophomore's outstretched hands. "Touchdown!" The crowd erupted. Tom didn't spike the ball, just held it gingerly, like it might turn to clay in his grip. Miss J materialized beside Jenfer, her breath warm with the scent of stolen cafeteria peppermints. "Notice anything feline about that throw?" she murmured. Jenfer didn't answer. She was too busy watching Tom peel off his helmet in slow motion, revealing a smear of charcoal across his temple, the exact shade she'd used to sketch the football's parabola. When he looked toward the art club's banner, hung crookedly by the pep band, its edges still damp with paste, his eyes reflected the stadium lights in vertical slits. Just for a heartbeat. Just long enough. The kiln's glow painted shadows across the locker room tiles like a panther stretching awake. Jenfer pressed her palms against the metal door, feeling the vibration of shoulder pads hitting concrete through her fingertips. Tom's voice carried over the hiss of showers, freak accident, but the way his cleats scuffed the tiles betrayed him. Each scrape sounded like a cat burying evidence. Miss J's laughter curled through the steam, rich and knowing. "Funny how accidents happen," she purred to no one, rolling a lump of clay between her hands into something suspiciously whistle-shaped. Jenfer's sketchbook fell open to yesterday's page where she'd drawn Tom mid-tackle, his body a parabola of motion, the football a comet trailing from his fingertips. Except now she noticed what she hadn't before, the way his pupils dilated mid-leap, not with aggression but something closer to exhilaration. The shower faucet squeaked off. Tom emerged rubbing his neck where Miss J's paperclip had struck, his jersey clinging to shoulders suddenly less imposing when soaked. He froze at the sight of Jenfer's sketch, water dripping onto the charcoal curves that made him look graceful. "That's not," he started, then swallowed when the clay whistle Miss J had crafted let out a sound like a kitten's mewl. The kiln exhaled another wave of heat that carried the scent of burnt sugar. One of Tom's teammates, the one with the chipped tooth, snatched the sketchbook and held it aloft. "Yo, Tomcat. You gonna let M turn you into some artsy-fartsy?" His taunt died when Tom lunged not for the book but the ceramic wolf grinning on the drying rack. His fingers hovered over its fangs before recoiling. Jenffer saw it then, the tremor in his hands usually hidden under tape and chalk dust. Miss J flicked clay from under her nails. The flecks landed on Tom's jersey numbers, dotting the 8 like bullet holes. "You know why cats always land on their feet?" She didn't wait for an answer. "They're not afraid of falling." Tom's breath hitched when Jenfer's charcoal found a fresh page, sketching rapid lines that resolved into a football player mid-fumble, the moment where glory and failure balanced on a knife's edge. His reflection warped in the kiln's surface, stretched thin as paper over a frame. The sophomore with the bad knee suddenly laughed, a startled bark that echoed off the clay-smeared drying racks. "Coach said art was for sissies," he wheezed, rubbing his brace, "but my PT makes me draw my knee's range of motion every week." He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket, revealing meticulous anatomical sketches marked with degrees and dates. Miss J's claws, no, fingernails, dug into fresh clay. "Funny," she murmured, "how the body remembers what the mouth denies." Tom's cleat scuffed the linoleum where the paperclip had bounced earlier. The kiln's last dying hiss sounded suspiciously like laughter. Jenffer watched his shoulders hitch, not a shrug but the first tremor of an avalanche. When he reached for the anatomy sketch, his fingers left gray fingerprints on the paper. "Show me," he muttered, and the football team collectively held their breath. Miss J flicked a glob of clay onto the drying rack. It landed with a wet splat, shaping itself into a crouching panther mid-pounce. "Careful," she murmured. "Some things leave marks." Tom's jersey clung to his shoulder blades where sweat had darkened the fabric into something like wings. The sophomore with the bad knee nudged forward. "Coach says art's for." "Coach," Miss J interrupted, rolling another clay ball between her palms, "can't diagram a flea flicker to save his life." The kiln groaned agreement. Jenfer's charcoal hovered over the cracked helmet sketch as Tom's shadow stretched long across the paper, first a linebacker's bulk, then, as the sun shifted through the high windows, something distinctly feline in the curve of his spine. Tom's cleats scraped concrete as he edged closer, his shoulder pads hitching with each step like armor he'd suddenly outgrown. The scent of wet clay and liniment mixed oddly in the humid air. Jenffer watched his throat work, the way his champ tattoo stretched over flexing tendons, before he rasped, "You been studying our game footage or something?" Miss J's laughter unspooled like a purr. "Better." She twirled a sculpting tool between her fingers. "She draws what the stats don't show. Like how your left foot pivots 3 degrees wider on play action." The kiln chose that moment to exhale a sigh of superheated air, sending Tom's sweat-damp bangs fluttering. Jenffer saw it click behind his eyes, the realization that someone had seen him more precisely than any coach's camera. The sophomore with the bad knee was already tracing routes in the clay dust coating the bench. "You really think," his voice cracked as he mimicked Jenfer's sketched pass pattern with a shaking finger. Tom snatched the sketch back, his grip crumpling the edges where Jenffer had drawn the opposing safety biting on a double move. The paper trembled, not from his usual aggression, but from something sharper. Recognition. Miss J's fingers twitched toward her scarf, a reflex Jenffer recognized now as her towel. The fabric always ended up twisted when she'd pushed too far, too fast. "Sweetheart," she murmured, flicking a glance toward the locker room's buzzing fluorescence, "you ever watch cats hunt birds?" The kiln's dying heat made shadows pool under the benches like spilled ink. "They don't chase. They redirect." Jenfer's charcoal paused mid-stroke. Below them, Henley's laughter rattled the pipes, a sound like gravel in a tin can. She suddenly remembered the gossip about Miss J's first year, when she'd allegedly redecorated the faculty lounge with every confiscated vape pen arranged into a middle finger mosaic. The story always ended the same way, and Principal Cho just sighed and bought her a new stapler. "You're not actually planning to hide," Jenffer realized aloud, watching Miss J's reflection warp in the kiln's curved surface. Her teacher's silhouette elongated like a cat stretching awake. Hints at her unconventional confrontation strategy, with Jenffer realizing their plan involves artistic redirection rather than direct conflict against remaining opposition, symbolized by Miss J's kiln-warped reflection elongating like a waking cat. Miss J snorted, twisting the hem of her scarf, the same violent red as the powerlifting team's chalk bins. "Hiding implies I ever needed to." Her fingers flicked toward the faculty parking lot where Principal Cho's car still bore the faint outline of a clay paw print on its windshield from last year's accidental ceramics mishap. "They don't call me Madam Chaos because I play nice." Jenffer rolled her eyes so hard her bangs fluttered. "Please. You're about as subtle as a cat in a dog show." She gestured to the kiln, its surface still bearing the claw-like scratches from when Miss J had adjusted the temperature dials mid-glaze. The scent of burnt sugar lingered, the same aroma that had wafted through the vents during Henley's infamous cafeteria speech last month, coincidentally timed with Miss J's experimental caramel sculpture. Miss J's fingers twirled a paperclip into a tiny grappling hook. Subtleties for people who don't know where the sprinkler system controls are. Her gaze flicked to the ceiling tiles, 3 of which were slightly askew above Henley's usual seat in the auditorium. Jenffer suddenly understood why the pep rally microphone had short-circuited during his anti-art club rant. Summary 1. Miss J's defiant posture, referencing past incidents like Principal Cho's claypot windshield, establishes her reputation for theatrical subversion, Madam Chaos. Jenffer calls out her teacher's unsubtle methods, citing the kiln's claw marks and caramel-scented coincidences, while Miss J hints at leveraging school infrastructure creatively, e.g., sprinkler controls, rigged ceiling tiles. Their banter reveals Miss J's history of orchestrating accidental disruptions to undermine opposition, contextualizing past events like Henley's mic failure during his anti-art tirade. The scent of burnt rubber wafted up from the gym below, Henley's team grunting through another set. Jenfer's sketchbook fell open to a half-finished drawing of the cheer squad's pyramid formation, their outstretched hands forming perfect catch points. "Lila won't bite," she murmured, tapping the sketch. "Not unless we dangle something shinier than revenge." Miss J's fingers twitched toward her scarf again, unraveling a frayed edge. "Oh, we're not dangling revenge." She produced a folded memo from her planner, Principal Cho's signature looping across the bottom, and smoothed it against Jenfer's knee. The heading read Spring Arts Initiative, priority access to athletic facilities for collaborative projects. Jenfer's breath hitched at the underlined clause, approved teams may repurpose equipment for performance art. Below them, a dumbbell clanged against the rack. Jenfer's thumbnail dug into the paper as she parsed Miss J's silent smirk. "Wait. You're not just getting them into the gauntlet," she inhaled sharply as the dots connected. "You're making their training our installation piece." Miss J's eyelashes fluttered, her version of a standing ovation. She unfolded a napkin sketch, Henley's team mid-deadlift, their straining backs forming perfect arches beneath suspended ceramic plates. Each weight bore the imprint of a different art club member's palm. "Performance art requires cooperative subjects," she purred, twisting the paperclip grappling hook into a makeshift hanger. The scent of burnt sugar intensified as the kiln cycled back on. Jenfer's charcoal hovered over a fresh page, her fingers twitching with the memory of Tom's shoulder pads digging into her ribs during their last confrontation. She shaded in the negative space between the football players' huddled forms, a shape that resolved, stroke by stroke, into a crouching lynx. "Henley won't let his guys near us," she muttered, smudging the graphite with her thumb until the predator's eyes gleamed. Miss J flicked open her Swiss Army knife, the one with the suspiciously clay-stained blade, and used it to pry loose a ceiling tile. A dusting of pink glitter rained onto the planner. "Oh, they'll come." She held up a Polaroid, Henley mid-clean and jerk, his face purple with exertion, the barbell's plates spray-painted with tiny paw prints. Especially after this circulates the boys' locker room tomorrow. Jenfer's charcoal snapped mid-stroke. The scent of peppermint gum and vengeance hung thick as Miss J unfolded another photo, the cheer squad's pyramid collapsing in perfect unison, their hands forming artful arcs that, if you squinted, resembled a middle finger. "You've been planning this since September," Jenffer realized, watching Miss J's reflection warp in the kiln's curved surface like a grinning Cheshire cat. Miss J plucked a paperclip from her hair, twisting it into a tiny grappling hook. "September?" Her laugh tasted like stolen cafeteria cocoa. "Sweetheart, I had contingency plans before I signed my contract." Below them, Henley's dumbbells clanged against the rack in arrhythmic fury. Jenfer's sweater slipped entirely off one shoulder as she leaned in, exposing the edge of a sharp-drawn panther prowling her collarbone, last week's art class warm-up. The kiln exhaled another wave of burnt sugar as Miss J unfolded a napkin sketch from her planner, Henley mid-clean and jerk, his face purple with exertion, the barbell's plates spray-painted with tiny paw prints. "Funny thing about Atlas," she murmured, smoothing the crumpled edges. "He chose to hold up the sky." Jenfer's charcoal hovered over fresh paper, catching the exact moment Tom's shadow stretched long across the locker room tiles, first a linebacker's bulk, then something distinctly feline in the curve of his spine. Unknowingly lifting pod weights, planning to weaponize locker room humiliation and male ego to force participation. Their scheme ensures Henley's team joins the art installation to disprove manipulation allegations, playing directly into Miss J's orchestrated scenario. She reveals long-term scheming predating her employment, displaying staged photos of the cheer squad's accidental artistic rebellion. Jenffer notices her panther sketch mirrors Miss J's paw-print sabotage on Henley's weights, while the kiln's heat parallels Henley's coerced participation. Jenfer's charcoal captures Tom's transforming silhouette, confirming even former opponents are being reshaped by artistic infiltration. Below them, Henley's dumbbells clanged against the rack in arrhythmic fury. Jenfer's thumbnail dug into the clay-smudged edge of Miss J's planner. "So we give them the sky to hold," she realized aloud, watching the cheer squad's pyramid formation sketch ripple under her breath. The graphite lines blurred into something new, a football player's outstretched arms becoming Atlas's trembling shoulders, a cheerleader's cupped hands morphing into the curve of celestial spheres. Miss J's fingers twitched toward her scarf, always the tell. The fabric slipped loose to reveal a string of tiny clay paw prints pressed into her collarbone like battle scars. "Better." Her whisper smelled of burnt sugar and imminent chaos. "We make them want to hold it." The Polaroid she slid across the table showed Henley mid-clean and jerk, his face purple with exertion, the barbell plates spray-painted with art club signatures. Jenfer's own Sharpie swirl was unmistakable on the 45-pound disc. Jenfer's charcoal snapped mid-stroke. Below them, the cheer squad's rhythmic clapping morphed into something sharper, the sound of glitter-coated nails tapping against lockers in perfect sync. Miss J's reflection warped in the kiln's surface, elongated into something between teacher and predator. "September?" she snorted, twisting a paperclip into a grappling hook. "Sweetheart, I had contingency plans before they installed the sprinkler system." The vents carried up Henley's frustrated roar as he discovered his chalk bucket filled with sequins. Jenfer's knee bumped the desk, sending a pile of sketches sliding, each one capturing the exact moment a football player's aggression faltered into curiosity. Miss J caught one mid-air, her fingers leaving clay smudges on Tom's charcoal-limbed shoulder pads. "Hidings for people who don't know where the fire alarms are," she murmured, flicking the drawing toward a bulletin board already papered with athletic department memos. One fluttered loose, revealing Henley's hastily scribbled "NO art crap in weight room" beneath Miss J's crimson lipstick correction. "NO artists were harmed in the making of your precious gains." Below them, the clang of weights gave way to Lila Chen's razor-edged voice. "Henley, your chalk dust is literally contaminating our mats." Jenfer's fingers twitched toward her sketchbook, already filling with the angular tension between cheer ponytails and weight belts. Miss J's planner creaked open to a page titled Operation Atlas, where Polaroids of the powerlifting team were pinned like specimens beside cheerleading formation charts. The kiln's heat pulsed in time with Jenfer's racing thoughts. They'll sabotage each other before the first deadlift, she muttered, smudging charcoal into Henley's furrowed brow on her latest sketch. Miss J's reflection stretched across the cooling ceramic wolf, her grin widening as she peeled a sticky note off the page. It read, *sabotage requires coordination. They won't have any *. Downstairs, a metallic screech signaled Henley's team abandoning their usual bench press for whatever torture coach had dreamed up. Jenfer's thumbnail dug into the sketchpad's spiral binding. Lila would rather eat barbells than spot for Henley, she pointed out, recalling the cheer captain's death glare when the powerlifters accidentally chalked up the tumble mats last month. Miss J's reflection stretched across the kiln door, warping into something between teacher and conspirator. Blackmail implies leverage. She peeled a sticky note from her planner, Henley's handwritten plea to Principal Cho about preserving traditional athletics, and pressed it onto Jenfer's sketchbook. This is mutually assured destruction. The scent of burnt caramel intensified as the kiln cycled on. Surveillance. Miss J's fingers twirled the paperclip grappling hook into a noose. Hidings for amateurs, she murmured, peeling back another planner page to reveal surveillance photos. Henley's team mid-deadlift, their faces purple with exertion, each barbell plate spray-painted with tiny paw prints. The kiln chose that moment to exhale burnt sugar air, making the images flutter like leaves. Jenfer's sweater slipped entirely off one shoulder as she realized, these weren't just blackmail. They were blueprints. Downstairs, Lila Chen's voice sliced through the weight room clatter. Henley, your chalk dust is literally contaminating our mats. The vent carried up the telltale screech of barbell plates dragged across vinyl, a sound Jenffer recognized from last month's accidental art supply lockdown. Miss J's reflection stretched across the kiln door, elongated into something between teacher and arsonist. September? She snorted, twisting the paperclip into a makeshift hanger. Sweetheart, I had contingency plans before they installed the sprinklers. Jenfer's charcoal hovered over a fresh page, catching the way Tom's shadow flickered between linebacker and Link's shapes. So we're not hiding, she murmured, smudging graphite until Henley's barbell warped into Atlas's trembling shoulders. We're, what, curating their humiliation? Miss J's scarf slithered through her fingers like a satisfied tail as she peeled back a planner page revealing surveillance Polaroids. Henley mid-clean and jerk, face purple, each plate spray-painted with art club paw prints. Call it an interactive exhibit, she purred, flicking glitter from a sticky note that read official team bonding exercise in Principal Cho's looping cursive. Downstairs, Lila Chen's voice cut through weight room clatter. Henley, your chalk dust is literally contaminating our mats. The vent carried up the metallic screech of barbells dragged across vinyl, a sound Jenffer recognized from last month's accidental art supply lockdown. Miss J's reflection stretched across the kiln door, elongated into something between teacher and arsonist. September? She snorted, twisting a paperclip into a noose. Sweetheart, I had contingency plans before they installed the sprinklers. Her fingertip tapped a Polaroid of Henley's team mid-deadlift, their faces twisted in exertion, each plate bearing a tiny sharp-drawn panther, Jenfer's signature swirl unmistakable on the 45-pound disc. Jenfer's charcoal hovered over a fresh page, smudging Henley's barbell into Atlas's trembling shoulders. So we're not hiding, she murmured, catching the way Tom's shadow flickered between linebacker and Link's shapes by the lockers. Miss J's scarf slithered through her fingers like a satisfied tail. Hidings for people who don't know where the fire alarms are. She peeled back her planner to reveal surveillance photos, cheerleaders mid-tumble, their outstretched hands forming perfect catch points beneath spray-painted barbells. We're staging an intervention, she purred. The kiln exhaled burnt sugar as Jenfer's thumbnail dug into the sketchpad, realizing Miss J hadn't just documented the feud. She'd choreographed it. The vent carried up Lila's razor-edged Henley, your chalk dust is literally contaminating our mats, followed by the telltale screech of weights dragged across vinyl. Jenfer's sweater slipped entirely off one shoulder as Miss J tapped a Polaroid of Henley mid-clean and jerk, his face purple with exertion, each plate bearing tiny sharp-drawn panthers. Lila's been collecting these since September, Miss J mused, flipping to a page tabbed leverage. 14 Building inspiration. Her air quotes left clay dust suspended in the late sunlight. Jenfer's fingers traced the Polaroid's edge. Henley's veins bulged like overcooked pasta, as the PA crackled again. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. A dumbbell clanged to the floor in the silence that followed. Miss J's pen hovered over Henley's straining bicep. Ironically, she murmured, he stole that one from my detention log. The Polaroid's backing peeled away slightly, revealing another photo beneath, Henley's star lifter wheezing into an inhaler beside a crate marked Maplewood property. Panther swirls. Miss J reframes their sabotage as a choreographed intervention, exposing her orchestrated disruption through forged documentation and staged cheerleader accidents. The kiln's heat distorted air mirrors Jenfer's sketches, blurring provocation with artistic curation as Miss J transforms athletic spaces into contested performance arenas. Jenfer examines Miss J's Polaroids, Henley's team lifting vandalized barbells, while Miss J reveals Lila's covert documentation labeled as team-building inspiration. The PA announcement quoting Henley's stolen words from Miss J's detention log exposes hypocrisy, reinforcing Jenfer's discovery of Henley's star lifter using stolen equipment. Miss J's layered provocations systematically dismantle Henley's authority through curated exposures. The vents rattled as Lila's squad launched into their pyramid below, their synchronized counting punctuated by the occasional thwop of pom-poms hitting backs. Jenfer's sweater slipped further down her arms. She could still smell the burned sugar from Miss J's accidental caramel spill in the faculty lounge last week. So we don't expose the sandbags, she said slowly, watching Miss J's pen circle the inhaler photo's date, homecoming eve. We expose their breathing. Miss J's smirk cut deeper. Henley's boys hyperventilate through mouthguards during halftime. Her pen tapped the circled date, the night Henley's record-breaking deadlift footage conveniently cut out before the spotters rushed in. But synchronized lifts require nose breathing. Which requires. She flipped the brochure to reveal Jenfer's own sketch of Tom midplay, his nostrils flared, diaphragm visibly expanding. Jenfer's bra strap snapped loose entirely as she leaned forward. Weaponized biology, she breathed, watching Miss J's reflection stretch in the fogged window, her silhouette elongating like a predator's shadow. Below, Lila's megaphone shrieked, *5. 6. 7. 8. The stomps that followed rattled the dust from ceiling tiles. Miss J's pen rolled across the brochure, leaving a trail of red ink that bisected Henley's straining neck. Every muscle group fatigues at different rates, she murmured, tapping the cheer squad's formation schedule. But synchronized counting? Her smirk sharpened as Jenfer's fingers twitched toward her own ribs, where Lila's choreography had left fingerprint bruises last spring. That burns them all at once. The PA crackled again, Henley's voice fraying at the edges, as a dumbbell crashed somewhere below. Jenfer's sweater slid down one shoulder completely now, revealing the fading green-yellow splotch from when she'd caught Henley's accidentally dropped weight rack. Miss J's pen stilled. Lila's girls will count reps in eighth notes, she said, flipping to a page where someone had scrawled 32-count pyramid over Henley's training log. While his boys choked trying to match quarter-note rests. Jenfer's breath hitched. She could already see it, Henley's star lifter's face purpling as he failed to sync his breathing with the cheer squad's staccato rhythm, the way his trembling arms would betray him halfway through the routine. The brochure's glossy surface warped under her fingernails. And when they flail? The announcer's grin widened. That's when you pounce. Jenfer's fingers twitched. The scent of chalk dust thickened as his muscles coiled, not for brute force, but for the kind of precision that turns a whisper into a seismic event. The boombox's bass stuttered. Miss J's sequence caught the flickering light like scattered constellations. Then the emergency exit burst open with a sound like a trash can full of sheet metal being kicked down a flight of stairs. A wiry figure in a trench coat patterned with neon paw prints stumbled in, dragging a massive velvet sack that clanged with every step. The stranger's goggles were askew, revealing wild eyes and a nose that had clearly been broken, possibly by previous attempts at whatever insanity this was. Hold the scoring. The newcomer's voice cracked like a teenager's mid-puberty. They shrugged off the trench coat to reveal a skin-tight black bodysuit covered in glowing circuit patterns that pulsed in time with their ragged breathing. "I'm here to," they paused to wheeze dramatically, "challenge the champions, with science." The crowd murmured as the figure dramatically removed oversized goggles, revealing eyes dilated wide enough to see their own optic nerves. The air smelled suddenly of ozone and burnt toast. Miss J's sequins dimmed momentarily as the gym's lights flickered in sympathy with the stranger's twitching fingers. Jenfer's nose wrinkled first. That scent wasn't just Jim's socks. Her pupils contracted to vertical slits as the newcomer's platform boots clicked across the rubber flooring, each step leaving behind tiny craters of melted synthetic material. The brass cat statue near the bleachers let out a metallic groan as its tail curled involuntarily toward the figure. The woman wore a skin-tight bodysuit made from what appeared to be braided tungsten wire, her platinum dreadlocks writhing like electrified anacondas. "Tisk," she tooted, snapping her fingers. The sound wave shattered 3 ceiling tiles directly above Miss J's boombox. "Amateur hour ends now, kittens." Her name tag read Valentina, the Siberian Volkov in Cyrillic script, the letters occasionally catching fire. Jenfer's nostrils flared as he caught the scent, not sweat, not chalk dust, but something far worse, politics. Valentina was the muscle behind Mayor Petrov's controversial urban beautification campaign that had bulldozed 6 community gardens last month. The Siberian's biceps flexed ominously as she cracked her knuckles, each pop timed perfectly with the boombox's skipping beats. Miss J's sequined glove hovered protectively over Jenfer's wrist. "Easy, kitten," she murmured, just loud enough for him to catch the warning beneath the endearment. The Siberian's smile widened, revealing teeth filed to subtle points, a predator's grin that made the biology teacher drop her clipboard with a clatter. Across the gymnasium, unnoticed in the frenzy of celebration, the brass cat statue's tail twitched. Not the metal-on-metal shiver of settling weight, but the fluid flick of living flesh. Its painted pupils dilated as the first droplets of melted wax pattered from its whiskers onto the wooden pedestal. The janitor mopping nearby paused, nostrils flaring at the sudden scent of bergamot and burning fur. Miss J's sequined sleeve snagged on Jenfer's belt buckle as they turned toward the exit. The metallic ping echoed strangely, like a coin dropped in an empty cathedral. Both champions froze mid-step. Years of training had honed their reflexes to recognize when gravity itself hesitated. The brass cat's ears flattened against its skull with an audible screech of bending metal. Behind them, the janitor's abandoned broom clattered to the floor. Dust motes hung suspended in the fluorescent light, each particle trembling as if caught in a spiderweb of invisible tension. Jenfer's fingers twitched toward Miss J's wrist, his calloused fingertips brushing the pulse point where her titanium bracelets should have been. The jewelry was gone, leaving pale indentations that spelled out brawn brilliance in reverse braille. Miss J inhaled sharply when his thumb traced the welt left by the brass cat's tail. "You cheated," she murmured without accusation, her voice lower than the boombox's dying power hum. Jenfer's smirk curled like a satisfied tomcat. "Cheated?" He pressed her against the trophy case, glass rattling behind her sequined back. "I let you win." Miss J's laughter ricocheted off the lockers as his fingers traced the titanium bracelets circling her wrists, family heirlooms that doubled as impromptu handcuffs when the mood struck. The scent of chalk dust and exertion still clung to them, mingling with something hotter beneath the fluorescence. "Think they'll put up a plaque?" Jenfer murmured against her collarbone, teeth grazing the sequined strap of her leotard. Here stood the woman who bench-pressed a Buick. Miss J snorted, swatting his shoulder with enough force to send chalk dust flying from her palm. The janitors were already sweeping up fallen ceiling tiles, one muttering about OSHA violations while another pocketed a shiny pink sequin like a sacred relic. Across the gym, Sir Whiskers the mascot crouched on the brass cat statue's head, tail flicking as he stared at the industrial fan with murderous intent. The PA system crackled unexpectedly. "Attention, competitors," came a voice that wasn't Mr. Haversham's, higher, sharper, vibrating with the crisp enunciation of someone who'd practiced pronunciation with a mouthful of marbles. "This is Principal Malkovich from Willowbrook Elementary. We've just received reports." Static swallowed the next words, but the outline of catastrophe was clear. 37 elementary school children, hyped on stolen espresso shots from the teacher's lounge, were storming the high school armed with homemade lassos and an unnerving amount of confidence. Jenfer's fingers twitched against Miss J's waist as the first tiny combatants burst through the gym doors. Their makeshift ropes, braided from jump rope segments and shoelaces, whirled overhead with terrifying precision. One latched onto Miss J's titanium bracelet with a metallic ping, the child at the other end immediately planting her feet like a rodeo cowboy bracing against a bull. "Did we?" Miss J began, but the PA system screeched with feedback before she could finish. Through the distortion, Principal Haversham's panicked voice crackled, "Attention! The 5th grade recess monitors have lost containment of the competitive jump rope unit." I repeat. The gym doors burst open again, this time revealing a tsunami of elementary schoolers wielding neon jump ropes like lassos. Their shrieks bounced off the rafters as they stampeded toward the abandoned boombox, which had begun inexplicably playing a distorted version of "Who Let the Dogs Out" at half speed. Jenfer's grip tightened around Miss J's wrist, not in alarm, but with the delighted anticipation of a cat spotting a particularly chaotic ball of yarn. Behind the children, Principal Haversham skidded into view clutching a clipboard that was visibly smoking at the edges. The bake sale," he wheezed, eyes wild with the manic gleam of a man who'd just remembered his entire career depended on selling gluten-free brownies. They turned the cafeteria into a fondue fountain situation. The chess team is using baguettes as oars. Miss J's sequined shoulder twitched in a shrug that sent prismatic reflections dancing across the fire extinguisher case. "Darling, you said you wanted community engagement." Her manicured fingers absently traced the titanium motto bracelets as she watched Jenfer balance the brass cat statue on one knee while texting with his free hand. The statue's tail swayed perilously close to knocking over a pyramid of protein shake samples. Across the gymnasium, 12-year-old Becky Martinez hyperventilated into her inhaler. Her notebook, open to a page titled "Science Fair Ideas," now bore frantic sketches of Miss J's biceps with labels like "Possible Anti-Gravity Properties." Next to her, the school mascot Sir Whiskers arched his back at the scent of Jenfer's tuna pocket sandwich, an aroma that somehow cut through the lingering musk of chalk and industrial cleaner. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets as Principal Haversham wiped his brow with a handkerchief monogrammed BH. Threadbare from years of mopping up questionable decisions. His gaze darted between the brass cat statue, now wearing a tiny Viking helmet someone had produced from their backpack, and the janitor's retreating figure. "Next year," he muttered to the empty air, "bake sale." Across the gym, Miss J's pink sequins caught the dying light as she inspected a fresh scratch on her titanium bracelet, a souvenir from when the brass cat's tail had swung wild during her final pose. She ran her thumb over the groove, feeling the subtle vibration of the metal still resonating from the lift. The scent of ozone and old sweat clung to her skin, mixing with the fading citrus of Jenfer's cologne as he leaned against the wrestling mats beside her. One of the janitors whistled low as he dragged his mop through a puddle of spilled Gatorade near the announcer's podium. "Damn. That cat statue left claw marks in the rubber flooring," he muttered to his coworker, pointing to 4 parallel grooves where the brass paws had dug in during Jenfer's shoulder carry. The second janitor just shrugged and kept sweeping, his eyes flicking to Miss J's discarded 2-ton barbell still warping the platform beneath it. Meanwhile, near the trophy case, the school mascot Sir Whiskers sat licking one paw with deliberate disdain while staring at the brass cat replica. His tail twitched twice before he suddenly pounced onto the statue's back, sinking his claws into the metal with a screech that made 3 freshmen drop their phones. The cat perched there like a tiny conqueror atop a conquered giant, his golden eyes daring anyone to remove him. Backstage, unnoticed in the chaos, the industrial fan gave one last shuddering wheeze before its blades snapped off entirely, launching one directly into the scoreboard with a shower of sparks. The digital display flickered wildly, changing the final scores to nonsensical symbols before shorting out completely. A single glowing pixel remained, blinking like a conspiratorial wink in Miss J's direction. Jenfer caught the scent first, burnt wiring and something distinctly un-gym-like. His nose twitched as he turned toward the ventilation ducts just as a calico house cat tumbled out in a flurry of dust bunnies, landing neatly atop the abandoned boombox. The cat, clearly not part of the show, stretched luxuriously before fixing golden eyes on the brass statue still gleaming under the emergency lights. Its tail twitched once. Twice. Then it pounced. The brass cat toppled with a resounding gong that sent vibrations through the floorboards. Miss J's sequined sleeve snagged on Jenfer's shirt buttons as they whirled toward the sound, their synchronized reflexes honed from years of shared competitions. From the shadows near the bleachers, Sir Whiskers the Siamese arched his back, hissing at the intruder now batting the fallen statue's tail with single-minded determination. Miss J's fingers flexed unconsciously, still humming with the phantom weight of her final lift. She'd hoisted 2.5 tons overhead with one arm like it was a grocery bag, her titanium bracelets glowing cherry red from the strain. The moment hung in everyone's memory, her leotard seemed straining, sweat turning her platinum curls dark at the roots, that single trembling second where physics seemed to pause before conceding defeat. Even now, chalk dust drifted through the air like snowflakes around her, settling on her collarbone where Jenfer's teeth had left faint impressions. Behind them, the brass cat statue lay on its side, its molten wax whiskers pooling into the grooves left by Sir Whisker's claws. The calico interloper, now perched atop the toppled monument, flicked an ear toward the sound of Jenfer's chuckle. Still showing off, love, she tapped the fresh scratch on her bicep where the statue's tail had grazed her. That last lift would have collapsed the Brooklyn Bridge. The boombox, miraculously still functional despite the feline assault, stuttered to life with a bassline that vibrated the loose screws in the bleachers. Miss J's reflection grinned back at her from the trophy case glass, distorted by the cracks from where Henley's team had accidentally ricocheted a medicine ball last semester. She flexed her right hand, the one that had curled around 2.5 tons of steel like it was a kettlebell. The tendons stood out like cables under her skin, humming with residual energy. Across the gym, Becky Martinez's science fair notes now included a hastily scribbled addendum, hypothesis, titanium bracelets equals quantum anchors? Jenfer's shadow fell across the warped floorboards as he stepped over a puddle of what might have been Gatorade or molten wax. You're insufferable when you win, he murmured, close enough that his breath stirred the stray hairs clinging to her damp neck. His fingers traced the fresh scratch on her bicep, a perfect match for the brass cat's claw marks now embedded in the rubber flooring. Behind them, the calico intruder batted at the fallen statue's tail, producing metallic pings that echoed like a badly tuned piano. Miss J flexed her victorious arm, watching the sequins along her triceps shatter the emergency lights into prismatic shards. The 2.5-ton deadlift had left her capillaries mapping rivers of fire beneath her skin, every muscle fiber singing with the aftershocks of defiance. She'd done it one-handed, palms up grip, no wrist straps, while the crowd's gasps turned to static in her ears. Physics textbooks would need revisions after today. Jenfer leaned in, her lips brushing the shell of her ear. Would camp, he whispered, referencing the ridiculous rumor circulating among freshman spectators. She snorted, remembering the summers spent splitting logs on her father's ranch, axes sinking into oak with satisfying thunks, blisters hardening into calluses. Hardly the glamorous origin story people imagined for her titanium-clad wrists. The truth was simpler. Miss J had spent years hauling firewood while her classmates perfected cheer routines. She'd learned leverage stacking logs for winter, how to shift her hips to redirect weight, skills that translated eerily well to competitive lifting. Now, she smirked at the thought of Henley's team attempting bicep curls with freshly felled pine. Jenfer nudged her shoulder. Remember when you split that oak stump clean down the middle? Made your dad cry. His fingers traced the scar on her palm where the axe handle had splintered mid-swing. The wound had healed crooked, a jagged lightning bolt bisecting her lifeline, now hidden beneath fingerless lifting gloves. Miss J flexed her hand, feeling the old injury pull taut. That summer storm had turned the woodpile into a slippery death trap, rain blurring her vision as she brought the axe down. The crack of splitting timber still echoed in her dreams, followed by the metallic tang of blood dripping onto wet bark. Her father's calloused hands had trembled wrapping the bandages, rough carpenter's fingers suddenly clumsy with panic. Jenfer chuckled, tapping the scar with his pinky. Still can't believe you finished stacking that cord before letting him drive you to urgent care. His thumb traced the raised tissue where splinters had lodged so deep the ER nurse needed tweezers the size of pliers. The scar bisected her palm like a fault line, the same hand that now curled around Olympic-grade steel without flinching. Miss J flexed her fingers, watching tendons shift beneath skin still flushed from exertion. "Dad cried harder when I refused morphine," she murmured. The memory stung sharper than antiseptic, how she'd clenched her jaw through 17 stitches, her father's work shirt pressed against the wound turning rust brown. He'd whispered "Me Nina Furaz" through tears while the doctor sewed her back together, the nickname sticking like sap to bark. Jenfer's thumb found the callous ridge along her index knuckle, the permanent imprint of a hatchet handle. "You split that pine trunk like it insulted your ancestors," he said, tracing the crescent-shaped scar where a wood chip had embedded itself during her infamous triple-strike technique. The wound had healed jagged, matching the lightning-shaped scar on her palm, two halves of the same story written in scar tissue. Miss J flexed her hand, watching the old injuries pull taut. Wood camp hadn't been about lifting logs, it was about learning how falling timber could teach a body physics. That summer she turned 14, she'd spent 6 hours daily perfecting the art of redirecting momentum, letting gravity do the work while her wrists learned the precise moment to twist away. The axe became an extension of her arms, her hips pivoting with the same calculated precision she'd later used to hoist barbells overhead. Splinters became her first training weights.